Hey, folks, it is Wednesday night, and you know what that means? It's Humpday Happy Hour with your good friends at Dentist in the Know. We're here to bring you whatever Jeff says, which is like unbiased, unpredictable, apolitical, all that kind of stuff, the dental stuff, just to keep you into the know. I'm Chad Duplantis, practicing dentist in Fort Worth, Texas, and tonight you're stuck with me because Jeff is not with us tonight. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Everything's okay. JB has left for the minute. I can see her down below. So you're just going to be stuck with me for a minute more. Now she's back. There she is. I didn't want to bring her blank chair up, but here's my good friend, Dr. Jennifer Bell from Holly Springs, North Carolina. How are you?
I'm good. I'm wearing this sweatshirt. First off, forgive me for running off a bit. My youngest came to the door and was a little weepy and said she just needed a hug. So, when you get that moment, you got to seize it. And unfortunately, that meant abandoning one of my best friends on live TV, camera stream,
okay.
Whatever we call this thing.
It's all good. I was well prepared. Of course, I don't have Jeff's script that he goes through every single time.
I know.
So like, how you doing?
This is your backstage pass and all the current events, trends, politics.
Yeah. I was like, whatever. It just roll with it. Just roll with it. But
you've only heard him say it like 400 times.
I did mention that Jeff was not with us tonight, and I kind of was evasive about it, but I wanted to show y'all something. So Jeff is under the weather tonight, and he's a big deal where he lives in Conway, South Carolina. Yeah. You know that, right? So I was Googling, Jeff Horowitz, Conway, South Carolina, and I found this picture tonight. And I guess with Jeff having a head cold, it's not COVID. We just want to make that clear.
I know.
The whole town, much like Ferris Bueller, is praying for Jeff this evening.
That's right.
So if everybody would just think of Jeff tonight, who's out with a head cold. But I was amazed. I mean, the only water tower in Conway, South Carolina. I mean, it's basically lit up for Jeff. I don't know who got up there and spray painted that, but
you know what? I'm going to be really honest with you. I know that this photo is not real because in the South, when we spray paint our water towers, which we do, we choose John Deere green. And this is obviously not John Deere green.
I knew that's
so
where
I already
you were
know
headed.
This is fake news.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
this
is obviously fake
that's
news.
Where you were headed. But anyways, Jeff, we're thinking of you. We love you. And there you go, buddy. We have a great guest tonight, a soon-to-be Dr. Darcy Estefan, but I actually called her Dr. Darcy Estefan because in dental school, that's kind of what they told us. You're doctors to be. So anyways, I will refer to her as Dr. Estefan tonight. Really looking forward to hearing from her. I know that she's going to make some waves in dentistry, but before we get to that, I'm sure we've got some news.
We always have news. There's always someone doing something.
Well, I'll leave you to it.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. As you know, there's always things that are happening or brewing to happen in the world of dentistry. So let's just go ahead and dig right into it, shall we? It's becoming a little bit of a more common story that we're releasing out on Dentists in the Know about people practicing dentistry without a license. Yet another female dentist this time was busted taking molars out and in Rhode Island, and now is going to have to go through the whole process. And actually, the reason this came to light was because the patient ended up in the ER with complications post-extraction. And so they went after this particular individual. Instead of this being a hotel room, which was the last one that we discussed, they were operating in kind of a house office situation and offering dental care through that particular facility. So a little bit different. But anyway, nonetheless, resulted in some post-operative complications. And then unfortunately got this individual who's not licensed now facing time, possibly in jail. Another big cyber attack over the last week. So we talked about Aspen. Over 1,100 offices were impacted by that particular cyber attack. And this is kind of on the heels of multiple cyber attacks in the dental space. We had the ADA that got hit in early spring. We had Aspen, who got hit just a few weeks ago. And then another DSO, Great Expressions, got hit. Another 400 offices were attacked with about a week's worth of restriction on getting access to their data. Again, just kind of continues to reiterate the fact that the data that we have has some vulnerability to it. We continue to do our best effort to keep that data safe. If you haven't taken an updated webinar or cyber information education to try to continue to stay up to date on the latest ways, I have to say the best way that you can protect your office from a cyber attack is to talk to your team about not clicking on crap that they're not supposed to click on. I mean, in fairness, a good number of these started from individuals who opened an email or clicked on a link that they shouldn't have clicked on. And then it created this cascade of events that ultimately ended up with a cyber attack. So at the very minimum, continue to encourage, remind, and repeat to your team not to click on links that seem weird, not to check their personal email on their work computers, and to try to practice good cyber intelligence. But in addition, continue to work with your IT team to make sure that your data is as safe as you can. The reality is, even these large organizations are struggling to lock up lots of data at one time. So I think it's, understandable that a lot of offices are nervous as a small scale, trying to continue to create protective mechanisms to keep the data safe and also to keep themselves out of trouble for other issues that may come up. Lastly, there's some guidance continuing to come out from the CDC. While we don't have an official emergency statement in place on how we should be managing mask wearing, et cetera, in our practices with COVID-19, and actually come out with regulations at this point to suggest how we practice. They are continuing to provide guidance if you want to look for guidance on when you should be wearing masks in certain population uprises and different viral attacks, etc. They are continuing to provide that information. You can go to the CDC website. They're not statistically tracking COVID cases at this point, at least for public awareness, but they are continuing to provide guidance on that as well. I'll be frank with you. It's a little quiet this week, which always makes me a little nervous when it comes to dental news, because that means there's probably a big bump coming out. The last thing that we saw this week out of both the ADA and the legislature is there's the Armed Services Act that comes out and how they fund different parts of the program. That includes obviously the active military piece, but also benefits for both active and retired military and reserves. There was a push out of the ADA today to relook at dental care for those veterans as well as active military, to ensure that when they're in the military and then when they leave, that they have access to high quality care through TRICARE, and have access to providers who can provide care for them in their communities. So the ADA is staying on top of that initiative to ensure that our military is continuing to be cared for beyond their full-time service. And with that, that's the news.
So we were chatting with this young lady before we got on the show, and just what a dynamic person that she is. She is Darcy Estefan is her name. She's a soon-to-be doctor graduating from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. And post-graduation, she is heading to Viva Las Vegas to go do a GPR at the University of Nevada. But she has a previous career in oil and gas organization and development. Gave her a real unique approach to dental school. But this is where I am just blown away. As a senior, she was president of the Aesthetic Dentistry Club and president of the Student chapter of the American Association for Women Dentists, but she started her CE journey, which I wish I would listen to these words, but I'm a huge advocate of starting CE at a young age, or at early in your career, maybe I should say.
Yeah.
But she's been an active member of her local Seattle Study Club. She's done started the COIS curriculum, the Imprez curriculums. She's attended the AACD scientific session, and she's already doing SPEAR online. So welcome, soon to be Dr. Estefan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it.
Well, we are honored to have you. We're not near as cool as some of the people you hang with at COIS and Seattle Study Club and AACD and SPEAR, but we're pretty damn cool anyways.
Sometimes those people even pretend to like us in person.
Yeah.
Like I've seen it happen once or twice.
Yeah.
Actually, Darcy, if I can be really honest with you, and Chad, if you could just cover your ears so you couldn't hear, we're trying to get Adama to replace Chad on the show. And so we've had a few covert operations to see if we could make that happen. He's all in. Chad seems to not be so dialed into the idea. So we're working through the logistics right now, you know.
I can only imagine what would come out of Adama's mouth if he was on this show.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a fun guy. He's so fun.
You know, but it's just Adamo and I have a very weird relationship now. It used to be really good. You know, we had kind of a bromance going and I was okay with that. But now that he's gunning for my non-paying job, I'm very, very upset about that. I've got a lot of animosity towards him. As a matter of fact, I look the other way when I see him. I scroll right through all of his stuff on Insta and all. I can't do it, you know. I can't do it.
That must be really hard for you.
All that valuable content.
I'm working on a water tower in Keller, Texas that says "Pray for Chad." And I'm
He's such a likable guy. He's such a likable guy. That must be really hard for you.
Yeah, he is an amazing guy. He'd do a better job than I would.
So Darcy, tell us about your journey before dental school, your journey during dental school. How's it going? Because COVID would have been a part of that unique journey. And, you know, kind of where you're headed in the next year.
Yeah. So I went to undergrad and I got a degree in chemistry and a minor in business. And I thought that I wanted to be a physician, like every good Egyptian girl who wants to make their grandpa proud. And I was sitting in physics class and I came home and I said to my mom, who's British, that's why I say mom, that I was not going to be a doctor, at least like not a physician. And she asked why. And I said, there's physics on the MCAT and like, it's just not going to happen. I feel lucky to get out of this class with B's.
Exactly.
And what's funny about that is like my specialty in chemistry is physical chemistry. Which is physics and chemistry. And that made so much sense to me. But if you sat me in physics class and asked me to do Cal-based physics, I was like, no, that's just not happening well. So I went and I shadowed with some doctors and I came home and I was just like, why did I ever want to do this? I felt like physicians were not satisfied with what they were doing. And I mean, that's not to say everyone, but just kind of where I was at. And I realized that I was not going to be happy if I was a physician because I'm the type of person who like is not going to be happy if I'm not curing cancer for someone. And I felt like people were running tests and then saying, sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, or let me provide you a Band-Aid medication. So my thought was, okay, who actually fixes things? Surgeons and dentists. And I didn't want a surgeon's lifestyle. So I went and I shadowed a dentist and I loved it. I went and shadowed Dr. Trey Fellers down in Fairhope, Alabama. He's a pediatric dentist. And I don't know that I've ever met someone who loves their job more than him. And it was just so awesome. So I said, that's what I want to do. But kind of towards the end of my college career, I had a lot going on personally. I had some friends who passed away, and it was hard for me to make the decision to go to dental school at the time. And I actually told my parents, even if I do well on the DAT right now and I go to school, I'm probably going to flunk out because I'm just not able to be like emotionally present. And my parents were both really supportive of that. And they said, that's fine, but you have to do something. So I started working for a woman who had a business in organizational development and effectiveness, which is actually just like a really long title for people who go into organizations and make them better in some manner, right? They make them more efficient, they make them more effective. They teach leaders how to be leaders. They teach people how to build teams and make sure that you have a variety of people with different strengths to make sure that those teams are running well. So we worked with Fortune 50 companies, kind of on some big projects with them, and as they were going through transitions with new management and things like that. And that taught me so much about leadership and communicating with people and just really what it means to be part of a team. And then my boss said to me that I could go get my MBA and she would give me her company. So I had a really serious talk with my dad, and he said, look, at the end of the day, that's great, but someone's company is just their name, right? So who's to say that all these big clients are going to stay with you? And I was like, that's fair. I'm young. I finished high school early, so I was kind of like a little young with college too. And I was also a little nervous because I really enjoyed that. And so my thought process was like, what if I just love everything I do, you know? So then I went and worked in oil and gas. And that is one of my proudest accomplishments to date. I was thinking about this the other day because for Mother's Day, I got to give my mom an invitation to my graduation. And I was thinking that that's probably like my proudest accomplishment for my parents to date. But it's actually not one of my proudest accomplishments for myself. And maybe it's just because it's not real yet that I don't want to think of myself as achieving this big goal that I've been working towards for 10 plus years. But I went and worked in oil and gas, and I loved and hated it at the same time. It was extremely challenging, but I love a challenge. And it really taught me who I was and what I'm capable of when I stay true to myself. So I think that was really a valuable experience for me. And getting to work in really big teams, again, kind of getting to implement what I'd learned before about management and working with people. And also saving up money for dental school, because I knew that to go out of state is like $500,000. And I would want to buy a house at some point. I would want to buy a car. I'd probably need a new car, all of these things. So I was hoping to go through dental school with as little debt as possible. And oil and gas pays very well. So I woke up one day and I kind of thought I would always know when it was the right time. And I woke up one day and I was like, okay, it's time to step away and see if dental school is going to happen for me. So I actually quit my job in oil and gas, moved to Birmingham, Alabama, told maybe like 2 people, studied for my DAT, took the test, and went back to work in oil and gas thinking I probably wouldn't get accepted. I applied really late in the application season, and I know that scores are only good for 3 years. That like counted for one of my years. I applied in like October. And so I was like, I'll just apply. I'll get my name out there. I'll give myself 3 years max. And if I don't get in after 3 years, that's okay. I've had this career. I've been able to save up money, and I can kind of think about what I want to do after this and still, you know, kind of have some financial safety net to if I wanted to like start off entry level all over again somewhere. And then I got into dental school, probably the best birthday gift I was able to give my mom, because her birthday is December 3rd. And that was the day that I found out I was accepted. And kind of haven't looked back since. Deciding where to go to dental school was definitely really challenging. And I really feel for everyone who's going through that process and applying, because deciphering what's really important and what's going to be important for you and your journey and where you want to end up is, I think, just really challenging these days, especially with social media and all the things that you see and hear and read. So I struggled with that, and I actually wasn't going to go to UAB. I was going to go somewhere else, and turned a school down, decided to go to UAB, and then called that school back and said I made a mistake. That school took me back, and then I kind of made the decision for myself to go to UAB, and I've never once regretted that decision, despite the challenges of COVID and everything else.
So I've noticed in the first few minutes that you are extremely organized. I mean, obviously you had a job in that. You've got a great sense of team. You absolutely love dentistry, but on the other hand, you're a little bit wishy-washy if you kept going back and forth between dental schools. I'm teasing. I'm teasing. Have you ever left Alabama?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So I consider myself to be a transplant. I grew up in Australia. I think I'd mentioned that before. And when I was working in oil and gas, I would only get to come home once every 90 days for like
Where
one
were
day.
you there? Where were you for oil and gas?
I was all over. I spent a good bit of time in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and then I was in Houston and just kind of, bouncing around from thing to thing. And before that, with organizational development and effectiveness, it was kind of where's the client type thing. I thought I wanted to live in New York, and then I went to New York, and I was there in April, and it was like 36 degrees, and I was like, absolutely not.
So all of a sudden, Sweet Home Alabama is where it's at, huh?
Yeah.
It's so funny because Sweet Home Alabama, the movie, is actually what brought my family to Alabama.
Is that filmed? Was that based on Fairhope?
No, so it's not. But when we moved to America, and we were only supposed to be here for a few months, and then we were moving to Peru. And my sister was kind of at that age where it wasn't super cool to hang out with family. So we had forced family fun night every other Friday, which usually was like a game or something. And this one night we watched a movie, and it was Sweet Home Alabama. And I can still remember that scene on the beach where she's like, well, why would you want to marry me anyhow?
Yeah.
And my dad goes, girls, isn't that beautiful? And I was like, no. And they called a realtor and a travel agent. But I love it. After being gone for so long, I really, really appreciate the charm of Fairhope and that small community.
There's a lot to be said about that. It's funny, you talk about oil and gas. That's what I grew up with. That's what my dad did. And so I know Lake Charles very well and Houston very well. That's where I spent part of my childhood. So I kind of figured you were over this way a little bit if you were in oil and gas. So, and we have very parallel stories. I'll tell you one towards the end of the show, but very parallel stories and a lot of similarities in the way that, seems like a lot of what you do, you want to make your parents proud, but in the end it's you too. And that's awesome. I really commend you for that. So that's a great family value that'll suit you well throughout life. So
thank you. My dad has always kind of taught my sister and I that we have a place at the table, so to speak, and that we kind of maybe own the table, coming from his background where he felt like maybe his sister was not as represented as she should have been. So he's kind of always really instilled in us that it's about what we want and our happiness and things like that. So
that's awesome. Well,
That's really awesome.
Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead real quick and then we're going to come back to something. But where do you see yourself practicing when all is said and done?
Good question. So I don't necessarily have a place in mind. I have an idea of what I want. So it's for me more about the right opportunity. I would love to be close to my family at some point. But at some point in dental school, I also realized that I wasn't seeing people practice the way that I wanted to practice. And I didn't just want to go out and try to create that myself. I felt like I wanted more guidance. So to me, I'm more looking for an opportunity with someone who is going to practice similarly to how I want to practice, has similar values, and would be a good mentor, which is really challenging to find. So it's more about the right opportunity for me rather than the place. I think you can make a life anywhere.
I think that I'm gonna disagree with you there for a second, because I think that, and not entirely, but I think that with your personality and who you are, you can build exactly what you want, and I think you almost sell yourself short. So if you go somewhere, I would go into it as a mentorship, and hey, let me learn from you, let me associate with you for a while, and then go build your dream, because your dream's right here, and I can tell that just in speaking to you. You have a very, very impressive imagination, and I think you have, exactly what you want, and I think you can build it real easily.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much so.
Yeah, I
All right.
couldn't.
So I agree 100%. Let's talk about COVID, because I think there's a couple pieces of dental education related to COVID that I think are really important to dive into. One, I'd love to hear your experience, because were you first or second year
Sure.
COVID? First year,
Mhm.
yeah. So, what was your experience during that time period? And I think it's fair to ask, do you think schools have fully rebounded back from, when I'm probably 15 years prior to where you are now. Chad is probably 20. Jeff is like a dinosaur, so we won't even talk about it. They were still doing it on the pump thing. Like, he had to actually ride a bike to get his handpiece to move. So we don't really include his education in the conversation. Um, but how did that impact your career? Or your educational career? Do you think schools have rebounded back from that particular obstacle? And then I think there's a third part to that. What do you think doctors like myself and Chad, who are looking to bring young doctors on as mentees or associates, gosh, thank goodness, mentees, associates, etc. What do you think they need to understand about that particular part of their journey, and how do we support it? How do we understand it? How do we provide support and educational opportunities within that?
Yeah, I think those are all great questions. And I just want to preface this with, anything I'm sharing is just strictly from my point of view and my
Of course.
experience. So, you know, any other program or people at other programs could have had a completely different experience. I think that our program did a really good job of being proactive when COVID hit. I remember the day we had the first case in Alabama, and we were going on spring break, and we didn't know if we were coming back. We didn't know like what life was going to look like. And we already had a subscription with Zoom, the school did, even though prior to that, all of our classes were in person. And should we miss a class, we could be penalized like a letter grade in some of our classes. But it's kind of things like that that I hadn't thought about when we immediately had to go virtual. So I think the school did a really good job in those first initial few months, March, April, May, at least from a first year's perspective. I know that they had to work to adjust requirements and still, allow people to graduate, and then kind of figure out what does clinic look like, for everyone else after that. Now at
Right.
UAB, we have a really, I think, unique experience because we had a new dean. It was his first year when COVID hit. And we had a lot of faculty who were planning to retire that year, and someone who managed our simulation lab as well, who'd planned to retire. And some of our more senior faculty, once COVID hit, said, we're not wanting to come back. And with that, there's the challenge of hiring people when there's a hiring freeze. So we came back, and I think, again, the school had been pretty proactive. They had actually made us little bags with our teeth and our new dentiforms and all of these things. We were asked to buy a handpiece for home because they weren't sure if we were coming back. And we ended up not using those handpieces, which a lot of my classmates were upset about because they were really expensive. But I think I would have rather had the handpiece had we not been able to come back than be in a situation like some of my friends at other schools who weren't allowed to come back for months and lost out on that opportunity because there was also just so many supply chain issues. So we finished off first year, went into second year, which is where we started PROS. And the way our program approached that was instead of having everyone go into sim lab at the same time, we were broken up into groups. So we had like A group and B group, or gold group and green group. And it was kind of every other. Students were sending every other. So all of our classes were online except for our sim lab. And I think that was where I found things to be really challenging at that point, because we were taking PROS, and PROS was like a completely different language to me, right? Like I don't have a dentist in my family. So when I came into dental school, I didn't know the difference between a crown and a veneer, you know? And there was a lot of terminology, and we were also working with faculty who, despite being faculty for such a long time, hadn't maybe been in this position because people had retired or left and things like that. So I kind of feel like our class was the guinea pig for a lot of change at the school. We also have clinic renovations. Yeah, clinic renovations going on. So we lost part of our clinic, which is reopening again. But I do think that the school itself has been really resilient and flexible in making sure that we still get an experience. At no point have I felt like I didn't get enough of a clinical experience, especially when I was interviewing for residencies and meeting people from all over who said, like, I'm graduating and I've never done a class two.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of sitting there going, wow, like I did a whole mouth this morning, you know, or something like that. We have an abundance of patients who truly need care at UAB. So even though the class size was also expanded for the students below us, which was kind of another thing, I think we have like a really great patient population for that. And there's a lot of experience. The school's also brought in a lot of what I would call real world faculty recently. So I'm really excited for our upcoming fourth years and upcoming third years, because the experience that they're getting and the knowledge from people who are out practicing and, you know, have done Coyce and Spear and Dawson and Seattle Study Club and things like that, to come back to school and share that, I think is just really awesome. So there's definitely been downsides, and there's definitely been areas. I mean, when I was in PROS, I was like, oh dear God, I have to specialize because this doesn't make sense. You know, I think a lot of my class felt the pressure to specialize because of what was going on with COVID and just, you know, extra stress and pressure. But I also took that as like, I don't want to not understand this. So let me make that my main focus because I really want to tackle this.
What after residency, do you think there's a possibility of specializing or no?
I don't think so. So I don't think I've shared this with you. For about 3 years, I thought I was going to do dental anesthesia, and I like studied for all the tests and you know, there's only like 8 or 9 programs and all of that. And I was actually shadowing at one of my mentor's offices, Chris Mullinex. He's an oral surgeon who brings in an anesthesiologist once a week for cases. And he just looked at me during a procedure and he's like, Darcy, what are you doing? And I was like, what do you mean? You know? And he was like, specializing is for people who don't like dentistry. He was like, you love dentistry. Like you live, sleep, eat, breathe dentistry. And in him saying that, I just felt like a weight was lifted for me. And like someone gave me permission to like and actually like love and be interested in general dentistry. Because, you know, when you're going to dental school, you're so excited to tell everyone, I'm going to be a dentist. And then at some point in dental school, it's really sad to see how that changes to people saying, oh, just general.
Yeah.
Just general. And I don't want to be a just general dentist. I don't want to be someone who's just doing a little bit of operative, maybe like one crown here, whatnot. I want to really diagnose and treatment plan and really provide really great care for my patients. So I want to be like a true general dentist.
Yeah, I think I look back and I remember the start of dental school. We had one guy that walked in and announced himself as an future oral surgeon. We had one guy that walked in and announced himself as a future endodontist. One of the two made it, and it wasn't the oral surgeon. And they were just gunning the whole time. And I look back and I'm interested to hear 5 to 7 to 10 years from now, if you said you wanted to be an anesthesiologist. I thought I wanted to be an endodontist, and that's completely changed for me. If I had to do it all over now, I would totally do I would be a prosthodontist. If I could, if there was one residency that I was interested in now. I'm glad I'm doing what I'm doing, but it's amazing how your mindset kind of changes, and I can see yours is already changing. Tell us a little bit about your CE journey. When did that start, and what spurred that?
Yeah. So I was sitting in pros and going like, oh my gosh, this doesn't make sense. And then I was sitting in TMD and I was like, how do I ever do a crown on someone? I have to wear, I was such a liability, the joints, like what's going on, all of that. But I knew at that point in my third year, or towards the end of it, that I wasn't wanting to do anesthesia anymore. So I was like, okay, where do I go? Because this isn't enough. And I think I've had a phenomenal education at UAB. When I sit here and I look at some of our lectures and some of the things that I've learned in comparison, just talking to other people and even leaving CE courses or lectures and talking to people, walking out and saying like, oh yeah, that was really good. And, I knew this, but maybe not this. And other people being like, that was all new to me, it's been really, I guess, rewarding to know that I've taken a lot out of my education, but I felt like there was just still so much more to know. And I always want to practice responsibly. And I feel like I can't do that if I don't have the box, kind of John Coyce talks about expanding the box. So if I can't see it, I can't diagnose it. And then even if I can diagnose it, how do I treat it? Or like, who do I send someone to treat it? So I talked to one of my faculty members, and at the end of all of her lectures, it says like questions, and it's like John Coyce, Frank Spear, Pete Dawson, Pankey Institute, Seattle Study Club. So all the CE that I'd had at that point was like free CE. And it's not that there's anything wrong with that. It just wasn't giving me what I wanted, or I felt like kind of taking it to the next level. So I had a lunch date with her and just kind of talked about that. And I got really interested in the Seattle Study Club. I wasn't 100% sure what it was, but I went and followed them on Instagram and saw that they kept announcing something big was coming. And then they announced that they were having a Rising Stars Forum. And I didn't really know what it was, but I emailed them and I was like, hey, can I sign up for this? And they said, yeah. I said, well, I'm not a member. And they were like, that's okay. And then I was like, well, I'm actually not a dentist. Because when you sign up, it says, there's these roundtable discussions, and it says like, pick a topic where you can bring something to the table. So you want to talk about imposter syndrome. I'm sitting there going, I'm a dental student. I can't bring anything to the table. You know? And I actually had an unfortunate incident. I broke my finger on my dominant hand just like a week before my boards. So I was kind of out of clinic for a little while, and was really down in the dumps about, what did my future look like and all of this. And I'd signed up to go to this event, and I almost didn't go, but I was like, I've been looking forward to this since it got released, so I really need to go. And going to that event changed my life. I had no clue who people were. So I had no clue when I was like sitting down next to like Courtney Levine and talking to her for 40 minutes. And then she gets on stage and I'm like, what is she doing up there? Or like whatever. So I just very genuinely got to be myself, and I met some really amazing people who were so encouraging. And at the same time, I was so blown away. I sat there and I watched Tom Moore present a case. And I kid you not, I think about that case every night before I go to bed. And I'm like, I can't call myself a dentist until I can treatment plan like that.
Yeah, I've been there.
Like,
Cal's pretty
yeah.
impressive.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then when I went to Adamos and I saw him, he just like free-handed these vampire fangs for a patient. And again, I was like, I think about that case all the time because, like, how did you do that? How did it look so beautiful? And oh, how did it take you 6 minutes to do that crown prep? You know, stuff
And how
like
did you
that.
paint their lips afterwards?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Right.
I was really inspired there, and we also had David Chan and Marilyn Calvo from the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, who had reached out to do. David's doing this phenomenal thing. He's going to every dental school in the country and doing a composite veneer workshop. And I transitioned to president of our aesthetics club at the time. And David came, and I was like, I cannot believe that you can use composite to do that. Like, you mean to tell me that's not a real tooth?
David's such an incredible and
Such a
giving
good
man. He's
clinician.
just
Yeah.
he's a very gifted clinician, but even beyond that, he's just such a giving person. That's so cool that you're able to experience that.
Yeah.
I'm excited for every school who gets to experience that. I mean, it completely changed my life. And then keeping up with them, I talked to Marilyn for a while after that, and I talked to David. The day I broke my finger, actually, I talked to David on the phone about residency options versus like going out to work and things. And both of them just have such giving, kind hearts and genuinely really want to help people. And I'm just so grateful. Like, David will hop on a call with me, or Marilyn will hop on a call with me and talk something out. They've been phenomenal mentors for me. And obviously that drove me to be involved with ACD. Just to be around people like that and see what they see and the level of detail and the level of excellence, and to critique things, even though Marilyn doesn't practice anymore. She's always like, oh, no, I don't practice. Like, you probably don't want to ask me stuff. And then someone sends her a case and she's like, this, and this, and it's just really, really awesome. And then again, Marilyn set me up with Adamo. And then just kind of from there, it's been awesome.
So Adamo is doing something interesting that I don't think a lot of people know or understand, but the AACD has residency programs, and I want to piggyback on that because I think, your journey in continuing education outside of the four walls of your dental school has already been so impactful. And I don't think early career dentists, if they haven't had that aha moment where they took a course away from their dental school where the light bulb goes off and they're like, this was a piece I was missing, or this makes me feel better about the way that I do dentistry, or validates the internal struggles I'm having with wanting to do it this way, but being taught in a different direction. I think your message in going out and exploring different CE options beyond your dental school to really see the data, to see the scientific and evidence-based dentistry education that's going on beyond dental school is so valid. But even beyond that, there's these off-the-radar residencies that a lot of folks don't know about. And I think you have some understanding or appreciation of it. So care to highlight that for us?
Yeah, actually, so the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, and just as a disclaimer, I'm not like representing them or anything. But they have this cool residency that you can do if you're interested in cosmetics, where you apply and you submit some of your cases, and people who are accredited can take you on. They'll be your preceptor. So for 2 years, you actually go and work in someone's office with them and learn from them how to do these phenomenal cases, how to develop that eye really, and the techniques and things for producing these really excellent and responsible, functional aesthetic results. So Adamo has had 2 residents, and just because someone takes a resident doesn't mean that they'll, always take a resident. But it's really nice because, again, it's just one person who's paired up with this individual. So his current resident right now is my best friend, Dr. Sarah Cookoff. And she's having an amazing experience with him because, of course, he's the best. And not to toot her own horn, but I think she's the best. And it's great because he teaches her, like, every single day she has to take the ACD photos on someone. So she's learning the photography and making sure she's framing it correctly. And I think when you first go into one of those residencies, you should probably expect to be maybe like shadowing for a while, because you are going into someone's practice who's doing these really aesthetic, high dollar cases.
Right.
But the idea is that as you go through the residency, you kind of gain some more freedom. And I've definitely seen that with Adamo and Amanda. Like, I've seen him turn and say, all right, I'm going to loosen the reins a little bit for now. Like, here's your case. Like, you're going to do this type thing and whatnot. So it's awesome. And the CE too, that they get to experience as well. Like Sarah gets to help out with a lot of the CE. Adamo and Amanda go to COIS, and obviously like their Impress courses, which are highly recommended as well. So for anyone who's interested, they want you to at least have like some work experience first or have done a residency. But
when most people are getting burned out, you're getting ramped up, at least on the school thing. And I love it. And I think that you'll make a wonderful mentor to somebody one day as well. We are kind of like running out of time, but I could probably do this for another couple hours. I told you I was going to tell you a story, but there's so many mirror things. I broke my hand right before dental school. I hated physics and like absolutely hated it with a passion. And it was probably the
Same.
worst class that I've ever taken in my life. And I could never do it again. But I'll tell you this funny story. Got accepted to dental school, and I am in my last semester, and I'm taking the second physics requirement. And I have a strong B, like an 88 or an 89. And the professor comes out and says, so anybody who has an A is exempt from the final. You get an A. And he's like, everybody else, you have to take the final. Where I am checked out of undergrad. I'm done. And in my physics class, there's probably 150 people. I went to UT in Austin. So, here we are, we're checking out, and I'm like, you know what? Screw this. I'm not taking the final. So I go over to his office and I knock on the door and I walk in, and this was a really fun instructor. I wish I remembered his name, but he was really fun. Always had great experiments that he did in front of the class. Like one day he got on a merry-go-round with a fire extinguisher and showed how he could, it's hilarious. So I walk in and I was like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, I just wanted to thank you for a great semester. As we sit right now, I've got an 88, and I know that if you have an A, you don't have to take the final. I've been accepted to dental school, and I'm kind of checked out, and I just am very content with my B. And I was wondering if that same offer would apply to the students with a B. And here's a super cool instructor, and he sits behind his desk and he does this, and he goes, and I mean, just silence. And I'm like, oh, this wasn't a good idea. And he goes, okay, so basically you're walking in here and you're saying, oh, I got accepted to dental school and I don't give a shit about your class. And I sat there for a second and I go, yes, sir, you're correct. And he looks at me and he goes, that's fantastic. Congrats on dental school. You don't have to take the final. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And he goes, what was your name? And I told him, and he goes, as I'm walking out of the room, he goes, can you do me a favor? And this is in 1995. I go, yes, I can do whatever I can do. I'm happy to. And he goes, can you just shoot me an email and remind me that I gave you a B and you're content with it? And I go, absolutely, I can do that. And I turn to walk out of the room and I turn back and I go, I've got a question for you. And he goes, what's that? And I go, what's an email? This is a true story. And he goes, yeah, go to the library and figure that one out. Like literally nobody had the internet. Nobody had email. Nothing was done through email at this time. It took me 4 damn hours in the library to figure out how to set up a university email account to use it.
You could have just studied for the test.
I should have taken the final.
You should have taken the final. This is a terrible story, a life lesson.
How ahead
lost.
of the curve were you? How ahead of the curve were you? Because now you knew this email thing.
Oh yeah, well I was way ahead.
Yeah.
But anyways,
that wasn't that ahead because it was only in 1998 that I got my email taken away from me, unbeknownst to myself.
Yeah.
In my freshman year of college, because of a forward that I sent that took up too much space on the server, because they sent out like a warning. Because again, email very new. I know we're very old. And like now you can actually say to your kids, I'm older than Google. And that's actually makes the kids kind of flip out a little bit. They're
Isn't
like,
that wild?
Wait a minute, what?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's amazing how things have come. But I'm going to ask you to stay on as we close the show, because I just want to tell everybody that this right over here is the future of dentistry. And there's so much negativity out there in the world of dental schools, and especially on social media. And I think that everybody needs to hear what you have to say. It's been fantastic. It's been a breath of fresh air. You've given me inspiration at my advanced age. And I know that you have to JB as well at her advanced age. So thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, you heard it, JB. You're like, think you're so much younger than me. You're not.
I'm not listening.
Yeah. But no, we really, really appreciate you. I'm sorry Jeff couldn't have been here. You would have loved his antics as well. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And
he still doesn't know what email is.
Yeah, well, that's kind of a true story. Anyways, have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Darcy.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, Dinks.